Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into a major global flashpoint, this escalating showdown between Israel and Iran, and of course the absolutely pivotal role of the United States in all of this.
It's a situation with huge implications, changing fast.
Exactly. And our mission here, as always, is to take all these complex sources, articles, reports, our own notes, and boil them down for you. We want to give you the most important insights, the key facts.
Kind of a shortcut to being really well-informed, hopefully with a few surprising details along the way.
Right. Think of this deep dive as custom-made for you, pulling out the absolute must-know info from what's a very complex and frankly fast-moving picture.
And the speed of this recent escalation is, well, it's really something. The fallout, militarily and financially, is already significant, and it stretches far beyond just the Middle East.
Absolutely. So let's unpack the latest events. It really kicked off with Israel's Operation Rising Lion. We're talking deep strikes here.
Yeah, hitting Iran's nuclear sites, key IRGC command posts, that's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, for context, and even state media buildings.
And there were reports, quite bold ones, suggesting Israel even claimed air supremacy over Tehran during the operation. What's your take on that specific claim? Militarily, psychologically?
Well, claiming air supremacy over a capital like Tehran, that's a huge statement. Militarily, it suggests they believe they seriously penetrated Iranian air defenses, maybe suppressed their radar effectively. Psychologically, it's a powerful message. It's saying, look what we can do. It challenges Iranian sovereignty, their prestige. It's definitely aimed at demoralizing them, showing a clear edge in the air.
Okay. And Iran didn't wait long to hit back. The response was Operation True Promise III.
A significant counterstrike, over 150 ballistic missiles, more than 100 drones, and aimed directly at major Israeli cities, Tel Aviv, Haifa.
The human cost has been stark already. Reports mention 22 Israelis and over 200 Iranians killed so far.
Tragic figures. And beyond the human cost, there's the material cost. These missile arsenals are getting used up incredibly quickly on both sides.
And think about Israel's defense. They're intercepting something like 90% of what's coming in. They're using those really advanced aero systems.
Right, these aren't your standard interceptors. These are high-end anti-ballistic missile systems for long-range threats. Very capable.
But the cost?
Yeah.
It's staggering. We're hearing figures around $285 million per night.
Per night. Just think about that. That kind of spending just on defense highlights the immense economic burden. For many countries, that cost alone would be crippling. It really makes you question the sustainability of these kinds of operations.
It absolutely does. So, okay, let's pivot a bit. Let's look through the analytical lens. What are the experts seeing here? Because some sharp analysts are weighing in.
There's a lot of debate about the best path forward, naturally.
Yeah, folks at the Washington Post like David Ignatius, Max Boot, George Willick, they're making the case that, maybe outright annihilation isn't the answer.
Right. They're leaning towards a negotiated end, but crucially, one that's backed by really intrusive verification of Iran's uranium program, the goal being to genuinely prevent nuclear development.
So it's more about managing the conflict, not necessarily eradicating the regime or the threat entirely?
Exactly. That seems to be their core point. Trying to completely annihilate a state like Iran, especially one with nuclear ambitions, could just lead to, well, even greater instability, maybe a regional collapse. So the argument is for pragmatic containment. Disarm them nuclearly, but do it in a managed way that avoids a wider war.
Okay, so if containment, or at least managed de-escalation, is the goal, what does that mean for what comes next? Jonathan Panikoff at the Atlantic Council laid out 4 really critical questions.
Yes, and these questions are vital because they really get to the heart of intentions and capabilities on all sides.
Can you walk us through why these specific 4 are so central?
Sure. First, is Israel actually aiming for regime change, or is it just about hitting the nuclear sites? That shapes the whole scope of their actions.
Right, big difference.
Second, will Iran hit back mainly at Israel, or will it target U.S. interests too? That immediately changes the risk for American assets and personnel.
Okay.
Third, if Iran feels backed into a corner, will they make a dash for a nuclear bomb? That's, the ultimate red line for many.
Grand nightmare scenario.
And fourth, what was the real U.S. role in planning Israel's recent strikes? How much coordination was there? That tells us a lot about U.S. commitment going forward. These aren't just academic points, they define the strategic crossroads right now.
It's incredibly complex for anyone trying to follow this. And it's not just about actions on the ground, is it? The rhetoric is intense.
Oh, absolutely. Words matter hugely here.
You have President Trump, for example, using language like calling for Iran's unconditional surrender.
Strong words. And when you pair that rhetoric with visible military moves like deploying U.S. jet tankers.
Analysts like those at Barron's or Channel News Asia are warning this signals a very escalatory U.S. posture. How does that kind of talk and signaling change the risk calculation?
It significantly changes it. That kind of maximalist rhetoric, combined with military flexing, can easily be read by Iran as a direct threat, meaning the U.S. isn't looking for an off-ramp.
Which could push them to be more aggressive.
Potentially, yes. It could provoke them into deeper strikes, maybe even against U.S. bases or interests directly, not just Israel's, as a way to deter further action or simply out of retaliation if they feel cornered.
And let's not forget the economic side of this. It's hitting globally and fast.
It really is. Oil prices jumped about 8% almost immediately. That feeds right into global inflation concerns.
And for you, listening to this, driving your car, that could mean gas prices going up 10, maybe 25 cents a gallon pretty soon.
Yeah, this isn't some abstract geopolitical game. It has tangible effects on household budgets, global markets, economic stability. It's all connected.
Okay, so beyond the big picture moves, let's get into some of the more, let's say, behind-the-veil military stuff. Let's talk about the U.S. and this weapon, the GBU-57, the MOP.
Right, the massive ordnance penetrator. It's a beast. A 30,000-pound bunker buster bomb.
30,000 pounds. What's the strategic thinking behind potentially using something like that, especially against a place like Iran's Fordo nuclear site?
Well, Fordo is buried deep underground, heavily fortified. The MOP is specifically designed for targets like that, targets conventional bombs can't reach.
So deploying it, or even just credibly threatening to deploy it?
It sends a very clear message. The U.S. believes it can neutralize Iran's most protected nuclear facilities if it has to, using overwhelming force. It's a powerful deterrent signal.
And the U.S. already has assets nearby to deliver it, right?
Yeah.
B-2 stealth bombers, F-22s, carrier strike groups are in the region.
Exactly. The pieces are in place, which underscores the seriousness of the potential threat.
That's the overt display of force. But then there's this other layer, the covert side, which is maybe even more fascinating. Reports about Mossad using drones inside Iran.
Yes, this is really interesting. The reports suggest Israeli intelligence teams managed to smuggle drones into Iran.
And not just for surveillance.
No, the claim is they use these drones to actually neutralize Iranian missile launchers before the main Israeli airstrikes even began.
Wow. Taking out launch capability preemptively from the inside before the bombers arrive? That sounds like something out of a movie. How significant is this next-gen hybrid campaign?
It's potentially very significant. If accurate, it changes the game for preemptive strikes. Instead of relying solely on risky, expensive airstrikes to destroy launch sites.
You could disable them covertly first.
Exactly. More precisely, perhaps with less risk of immediate escalation, a smaller footprint. It achieves a key military goal, neutralizing the threat, but using intelligence assets and unconventional methods. It really blurs the line between covert ops and traditional warfare.
So with all these moving parts, the strikes, the diplomacy, the economics, the covert stuff, where does this all head? Experts seem to see two main paths, quite different ones.
That's right. Divergent scenarios are being discussed. One possibility is what some are calling a hybrid Cold War.
Okay, what does that look like? A hybrid chess match.
Pretty much. In that scenario, the U.S. ramps up its support for Israel think tankers for refueling, more intelligence sharing, maybe cyber support, but crucially holds back from committing its own ground troops or launching direct, large-scale strikes itself.
And Iran's response in this Cold War?
They'd likely lean heavily on their asymmetric toolkit, cyber attacks against infrastructure, more attacks carried out by proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen, maybe renewed threats to close the Strait of Hormuz, disrupting oil shipping.
So creating problems indirectly.
Right. Imposing costs, gaining leverage, but avoiding that direct conventional fight with the U.S. and Israel that they probably couldn't win. It leads to a long, tense standoff, constant friction, but maybe short of all-out war.
Okay, that's one path. But there's another prediction, a much hotter one. a kind of shock and awe scenario that could lead to a wider conflagration.
Yes, the counter prediction is that things do escalate dramatically. The U.S. decides to commit fully. Maybe they do use the MOP against Fordo. Maybe they launch deeper strikes alongside Israel.
What would push it to that point? A major miscalculation.
That's likely. A major Iranian attack that crosses a red line, maybe a direct hit on U.S. forces or significant U.S. assets, something that forces a decisive response.
And if that happens, if the U.S. goes in deep,
Then you likely see Iran feeling truly cornered, lashing out however it can. Through proxies across the region, maybe even direct missile strikes against U.S. bases in Iraq or Syria.
and the global impact of that scenario.
Huge. Oil prices could easily soar past $100 a barrel. Think global energy crisis, major impact on inflation, manufacturing, everything. Financial markets would likely panic, triggering serious economic instability, maybe even recession. That's the path towards a full-blown regional war with truly global consequences.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at military reports, analysis from places like the Washington Post, the Atlantic Council, economic forecasts. It really paints this incredibly complex, interconnected picture, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Military strategy, diplomacy, covert action, economics, they're all deeply intertwined here.
And understanding how these layers connect, the strikes, the costs, the potential futures, that's really key if you want to be genuinely informed about what's unfolding.
Absolutely. And as you consider everything we've discussed, particularly those reports about the hybrid drone campaign inside Iran, it leaves us with a pretty important question to think about.
What's that?
Well, does this kind of next-gen warfare signal a permanent shift? Are major global conflicts increasingly going to be fought in these shadows, dominated by cyber, by intelligence ops, by drones smuggled across borders? Or is this just another tool added to the toolbox of conventional escalation, one that still carries that very real risk of tipping over into full-scale, devastating war? Something for you to ponder.